In addition to speeding up the CPU by increasing the size of the register word size from 32-bit to 64-bit, there's some other things we can do to have a more efficient processor beyond just increasing cycle count. So there are four in the textbook. The first one, memory caching, we're going to go into more detail in Chapter 5, so we're going to skip that one for now. Just be aware it's one of the four performance enhancement techniques that doesn't involve just speeding up the processor. Pipelining, branch prediction, and multiprocessing. With pipelining, the only thing I want you to be aware of is that it's attempting to overlap instruction execution by performing each stage on a different instruction at the same time. They're kind of overlapping in registers, and there's a good diagram in the book that describes this, but don't worry about too much detail about how pipelining works. Similarly with branch prediction and speculative execution, where it's trying to guess what the result is going to be ahead of time. This is getting into a level of computer science that's really beyond what a school of business needs to get into. But again, it's just another way of trying to make the CPU more efficient. Not faster, more efficient. And then the final one, of course, multiprocessing is pretty straightforward. Just sticking more, well, straightforward to understand at least. Putting multiple CPUs on a single chip. Today we call them cores, so a multi-core processor just means it has multiple CPUs running on the same physical chip. And so more cores means more processing power. But CPUs use all four techniques these days. That section of the textbook is describing the logical aspects, the logical view of how CPUs work, and then it shifts to a more physical view. We talked about how switches differ depending on whether it's mechanical, electric, or optical, or quantum. In our case, a switch is just either open or closed, either pass electricity or not on a transistor. A gate means there are multiple switches wired together. Circuits are multiple gates wired together to do more complex processing. Electricity is, of course, what makes all this happen, but you need to be aware of some kind of fundamentals of electricity and what's good and bad about it. Resistance, I would say all three are important. Resistance is the big one that needs to be managed, just because anytime electricity is passing through a medium, it's going to encounter some kind of resistance, which is going to generate heat. And of course, heat is evil. Heat is the bad guy we're trying to defeat when it comes to CPU utilization and power. So heat is bad for anything electronic. Any electronic device is going to suffer if it gets too hot, and CPUs are especially susceptible to this. Also keep in mind distance, this circuit length down here. The closer something is on the motherboard to where it's going, the shorter the bus, the more efficient it's going to be, which will translate into speed. You saw the thermal solution, i.e. fan, that was shown in the video before that I showed you prematurely. And this is just a diagram of a heat sink. A heat sink is supposed to dissipate heat more efficiently, but it's not. A fan is different, where it's actively sucking hot air away from the CPU to keep it cooler. Also keep in mind from the video that you saw prematurely that when you open up a case and look at the motherboard, you can no longer see the processor itself, because it's almost always going to be covered up by a thermal solution device, whatever they're calling it, by a fan. It's always going to be covered up by a big ugly fan now. We said that switches, the on-off switching mechanism, are enacted in transistors, and we've gotten to the point where we're talking about billions of transistors on a CPU, and we've been able to get faster and faster by shrinking the size of the wires and of the transistors themselves. They're getting extremely small now. A wafer that's, one of these little squares here, a wafer of processors with 410 million transistors, i.e. switches, on each one, but we're quickly getting to the point where we can't make them any smaller. We've gone about as far as we can go in terms of increasing the number of transistors. The problem is we're hitting the limit of what can actually be done physically. We can't make them any smaller, and so some other options are to switch from electricity to using light and optics. But this is still just in the testing phase. Quantum processors, we saw a video on that earlier, but that's still very, very new and prohibitively expensive technology. So just increasing the number of transistors isn't going to take us in the future the same way it did for the last 20, 30 years or more. The last thing I want to do is talk about overclocking, which the textbook doesn't talk about, but I don't think we can discuss CPUs without talking about overclocking. Some of you have done this already. It's not always wise to do this, and certainly in the business world we don't do this on a regular basis, but for consumers who are wanting to eke out every little bit of processing power they can, there are different ways to speed up the clock in your CPU. And so I want to show you two methods here. And here's method number one.
Hey guys, I'm Theo Joe, and this is Quick Minute Tech. Have you ever wanted to overclock your CPU but thought it would be too difficult? I'm going to show you how to do it on your computer in just a couple of seconds. The first thing you need to do is take off the side panel of your case. Then you can just set it aside for later. Once you have the case open, look for the CPU clock on the motherboard, which controls the speed. It looks just like a regular clock. That's why it's called overclocking. Once you've found it, move the minute hand 1 or 2 rotations with your finger to get the faster speed. Don't touch the hour hand unless you know what you're doing, because if you overclock it too much, it could damage the CPU. After that, you're done, and you can put the side panel back on your case. And that's all it takes. You can verify in Windows now that you got the increase in frequency. It should be right in your control panel.
Okay, obviously that's a joke. That's not how you do it. There are a lot of useful videos on YouTube for how to legitimately overclock your CPU, such as this one.
Hello guys, Dan here, and in today's video I'm going to be showing you how to overclock a processor. I personally have my i7 here, and I'm just going to be showing you how to overclock. This is actually a K-SKU, and yeah, we're going to be overclocking an Intel chip. But yeah, the same principles will apply, and yeah, I'm going to be showing you how to change things like the multiplier, and also stuff like dialing in manual voltages, which in turn should give you lower temperatures but better stability at the higher clock rates. So I'm going to change the position of the camera and kind of get into it. I will say that I am using a Gigabyte motherboard, and I have one of the more advanced kind of BIOSes. But yeah, typically it's all the same really. All the layout will be different on all different motherboards and BIOSes, but you will kind of find everything in whatever BIOS you have for your motherboards. That's all good. So yeah, just going to change the camera, and yeah, I'm going to show you how to overclock. So it is relatively simple. So then I've just loaded up the...
Okay, we're not going to watch the entire thing. You can do this on your own time if you're interested in following up on this. Just note that overclocking involves changing the multiplier in your BIOS. This is something you set at the BIOS level. Also note that he was talking about trying to keep heat down to a minimum, because overclocking is, if you don't do it the right way, it's going to overheat your CPU, which is obviously bad, which will fry it. And please don't do this on a computer that you care about, but maybe an old PC that you want to play around with. Hey, AITP people, that might be a good project for you guys to play around with. Anyway, that's my show. This concludes part 2 of chapter 4 for CMIS310. I'll see you guys in class on Tuesday. Thanks.